thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you to the organizers for this lovely invitation. It's really an honor to be here. I was able to spend the day yesterday on Masaryk Avenue, and I had a 3-hour lunch at Porfirio's, and that was delicious. And I'm really amazed at your amazing campus and community here. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 12th grade through high school, and I forgot how special these campuses were, these sanctuaries with these courtyards and chapels. It's such a special community you have here, and that you can return here and see your colleagues and reflect and renew and think about what you got yourself into with your career at a place like this. I just really envy the space you have here. It's really beautiful. So, curiosity and command, Can we be curious and still be in charge? It's hard to be curious. Curiosity killed the cat is something we grow up hearing. And this children's book, Curious George is always getting in trouble. So we learn very early that curiosity generates a mess, and it's something to be avoided, or maybe in a lot of our organizations, suppressed. We want people to do their job, not be curious. And it's even harder to be curious when you're in charge, when you're trying to hold things together. So it's a difficult challenge to do both. So I was able to listen to nearly all of the presentations today, a lot of information, a lot of ideas for you to make sense of, a lot of new technology, a lot of new data that may or may not be useful to you. What to do with all of it is always a challenge. Where to go next? A lot of organizations are saying yes to everything, every new opportunity, and in those organizations, it can feel a little crazy. And maybe this is how you feel some days, where how could you protect time to think about what it is the organization needs to think about next? How do you protect time for thinking about the next step in the organization? How do you protect time for sensing the marketplace, something we heard is so important, when we just keep reacting to the emails and the messages, and our day is defined by reacting to messages and emails? And it's a really big problem. We need to be a little bit more deliberate about protecting time for the bigger, more purposeful work of our organizations. So here's a little outline for the next couple of minutes here. And we're going to start here with the challenge. And I'm going to start with, I figured if I was going to use a sports Mexico, coming from America to Mexico, I had to celebrate our women's soccer team, because our men's team, I don't have to explain. One of the best women's soccer team. I also, one of the best parts of my summer was watching Mexico beat Germany, so I was with you in that. But how to have the ball, how to be in charge, be responsible for the next move, and also see the whole field from above. This is one of the most difficult skills for an executive to develop. How to, kind of what I'm trying to do right now is, I need to deliver on a presentation. I'm going to get feedback from Harvard Business Review and Opina. So I want to deliver, but I also need to sort of, take a look at the bigger picture here. And it's really hard when you've got the clicker and the microphone and the lights, and it's really hard to also see yourself in action. Okay, am I going too fast? Are people paying attention? Do I need to slow down? Should I ask a question now? How to do both of these things it's always a work in progress, but we can get better at it. And it's essential if you're going to keep your organizations moving. So, how to see the whole field when things are moving fast, when you don't know what's going to happen next, and people are getting frustrated. How can you pay attention to the bigger picture when you feel responsible for the next move and it's moving fast, people are getting frustrated? How do you stay on top of the whole picture? Especially when they are after you, especially when you feel the heat, they're coming after you. And even more when it really is personal. They don't want to just compete, they want to hurt you. How do you, in those moments, not attack back and say, wow, isn't this interesting? What's happening right now? What am I missing? What else do I need to pay attention to? It's so challenging to ask a good question, and good questions are essential. It's so challenging to ask a good question in these moments. How do you stand there and say, well, this is interesting. Why am I getting kicked in the back? What else do I need to be thinking about? Usually what we do is we react. And that could be, we could fight back, we could run away, we could go complain, we could go look for quick fixes. But how to, do both of these things? That's what we're going to explore here. So this idea of staying curious and keeping the whole field in mind. When things are moving fast, you do not know what will happen next, people are frustrated and anxious, the competition is after you, and it can feel personal. Okay, so I don't want to dismiss the buzzwords. I don't want to be too cynical about the buzzwords. We heard a lot of them here today, and it's, a lot of, this is important work, but the buzzwords that we use without really thinking about, we need to adapt and disrupt and innovate. Amy reminded me that Facebook's, motto was fail fast. Well, look where that got us. Move fast and break things, I think was what, move fast and break things. And certainly, they've broken a couple things. So, and then, of course, in my country, there's a little obsession with winning. Everyone wants to win, 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 and that doesn't look like it's going to work out too well for us. So this is the world of driving, incentivizing, motivating, and pushing. And that work needs to happen. I don't want to dismiss that work. But we can very quickly be consumed by that work. We can become very preoccupied with driving, pushing, incentivizing. And that makes sense because that's the world of delivering results. And a lot of us feel the pressure to deliver results. So that's totally normal. But, the real work of the executive here, we're talking about, sort of taking your organization to the next level, this organizational transformation. The real work here really requires that you reinforce your corporate contribution and purpose and value. And as you reinforce it, also revisit it, examine it, and connect people to your corporation, connect people to meaning and purpose. This is, a similar theme we just heard. And build and diagnose and learn. A well-understood problem is half solved. Much of our work needs to be diagnostic work. And it's hard to stay diagnostic, and that's a curious activity, diagnosing What is it we're confronting here? It's hard to stay diagnostic when you're in the land of results, when you're sort of being driven by results. It's hard to stay diagnostic. It's hard to learn when you're feeling the pressure to deliver results. So this is the world of challenging, developing, guiding, holding, protecting people, supporting people. And this is, the world of contributing to the corporation's purpose. When we get swept up in the game, we lose sight of the field. Don't take a picture of this one. I think I misspelled something. When we get swept up in the game, we lose sight of the bigger field. And that's when we lose sight of our organization's purpose and our value contribution. That's got to be your anchor. That's got to be your anchor. Most of the emails you get during the day don't have to do with that anchor. Those emails often distract us from where the real work is here. So, when we're in the world of delivering results, we're relying on our organizational authority and our expertise, and we're working here with answers. Our job here is to have answers. Pressure's coming to us, problems are coming at us, and we look at our job description and we think, okay, I'll respond. And that's important. That needs to happen. Obviously, you need to respond. But we need to do more than that. We need to bring yourself to your role and lead with questions. And this is guiding people, staying curious, supporting, challenging, and continuously learning. And this is being in charge plus. This is the management and the leadership work. This is directing and leading. And this is really hard to do. It looks easy on the slides. Why is it hard to do? Because we do a lot instead. Here's what we do instead. We tend to make 3 mistakes. This is, a simplification, but we could think of 3 mistakes here. The first is we are easily preoccupied with tasks over purpose. A task comes at us, and we love to complete it. It feels so good to complete a task. Here we are at school, and you can all remember being in class. A lot of my students have this problem where you have a big paper to write, and first you clean your room, then you do the dishes, then you bake a cake, maybe. These concrete tasks are easier than the abstract assignment. These concrete tasks are more satisfying to complete, and we often feel as though I'll get to the bigger, more abstract work once this stuff is taken care of. And I understand it, but we let these tasks consume our time. We are preoccupied by them. And a part of that might have to do with our job title. If you're an executive, the definition is to execute, to perform. If you're a director, it's to direct or to manage. The other thing we do, and I see this all the time with the students who come to my school, taking a year out of work to figure out what's next because they made a lot of mistakes and they want to reflect on their career. And a lot of those mistakes include leaping to action. And I've said a version of this before, but this is responding to the pressures on us. People are looking to you for answers, and that pressure becomes very difficult to endure. We respond very quickly to that pressure. People are very dependent on authorities. Children are dependent on their parents, and employees are dependent on their bosses. And if you are a boss, that dependency on you to provide them with guidance, direction, that is exhausting. And we respond to it very quickly because we want to sort of move on. So when we feel that pressure, we leap to action. I was very, very proud of that little That's 19 little pieces of PowerPoint. We leap to action, and when we leap to action, we fail to diagnose correctly. This is the opposite of being curious. This is jumping to solutions. And of course we do it, but we can do it so much that it gets in the way. The other mistake we make is we don't analyze the gap. What do I mean by this gap? The gap between what we say we do and what we actually do. And that gap is where the work is. That's where your attention should be. Where do you see a conflict in your organization between what the organization says it does, what it says it delivers, and what it's actually doing? And we ignore this gap because we are preoccupied with tasks, because we leap to action, and then we fail to properly diagnose what is going on there. Why are we saying one thing and doing another? And that's where the understanding needs to be. So here are, 3 ways to summarize the common mistakes we make. Okay, so why is it so hard to focus on purpose? Why do we keep leaping to action? And why do we fail to address this gap? We are rewarded for firefighting. We want to be seen as and feel competent. We want to be seen as doing our job well. And my own work has reinforced this over and over. There's lots of other work that reinforces this. You'll find this in this most recent issue here, that our job description has a lot of power over us. We really want to satisfy the demands of that job description. And if that job description starts with executive X, we will be pulled into executing and performing. If that job description starts with director, we will feel the need to be directing all the time. And directing is the world of answers, not the world of questions. So it's one of the hardest things to do here is what we're talking about is how do you hold the space, manage the anxiety of people who are frustrated or stressed out, hold the space, manage their anxiety, tell them you've got this, and you also have a lot of questions, and that you need their help with those questions. That is, it sounds simple, but actually doing it is really hard. And it's one of the reasons it's hard is because the firefighting, the task completion, has gotten us to where we are. And it's very satisfying, and it helps us feel competent. We are risk averse, and we assume that we will be unfairly judged. We're risk averse because we are preoccupied with what could go wrong if I do something differently. It's hard to imagine what could go well if we do something differently. I worked with an executive once who really thought it was going to be a good idea to go 4 levels down and ask some questions of the junior people in the organization. He really needed to know more about what was happening on the ground. And this sounded like a brilliant idea, but he was so preoccupied with how he might look that the people that he would convene would go, wow, he doesn't know this? He was so worried that session would backfire that he never tried it. Other executives I've worked with who have tried it have always usually been sort of rewarded with, wow, this was terrific. I feel more connected to them, they feel more connected to me, and they're mostly grateful I came to visit. That's what people were really remembering. I came to visit. They didn't have a conversation around, wow, the CEO doesn't know how things work. But we're preoccupied with the risk there. And that's our human brain. That's what our brain is preoccupied with, risks. It's hard to imagine the opportunities when we take a risk. We confuse self-enroll. And What I mean by that is, if you're an authority figure in your organization, if you're an executive, part of your job is to be a punching bag. That is part of your job. And when we forget that, when our employees are frustrated with us, we can take it personally. But it's not you they're attacking, it's the role. It's so hard to be in Mexico and not reference my own American politics. But this is something Hillary Clinton was so good at. She knew how to be a punching bag. She could take punches better than anyone. She could sit there in hearings, she could be criticized, and she could get all sorts of feedback, and she didn't take it personally. That was the role. That was what it was like to be Secretary of State. That was what it was like to run for president, right? Donald Trump takes things very personally. He doesn't understand this aspect of the job, that the president's job is also to absorb the people's frustration. Parents understand this. If you have children or you work with children, you understand not to take it personally. You know, they're kicking dad because dad gets kicked. That's what happens. But when we get into our organizations, we can forget that dynamic still persists, that it's not you, it's the role. And our strengths become our weaknesses. What got you here will not get you there. Our strengths become our weaknesses. Often, we are promoted and celebrated for what we do really well. And then we're put in a new position, and we double down on those things we do really well. But it's a new position. The job requires different capabilities. The very simple story is the computer engineer. This is a group I worked with. A service that got a very big contract, and they had to hire 20 people very quickly to meet the demands of the contract. So the first thing they did was they picked their 3 best engineers, and they made them managers. And 2 months later, they're sent to a leadership development workshop, because those managers now are still doing what they used to do, which was detailed lines of code. So now if you work for this manager, they were all, in this case, men, he is hanging over your shoulder telling you what to do. And it wasn't big picture management work. So the strength that got them promoted, which explained their success, was now getting in the way. So if your strength, if your competence is taking care of the situation, a lot of us are promoted because send it to her, she'll take care of it. If that's your strength, putting out the fires, taking care of situations, reducing stress for other people, that's wonderful, that's great. But now you're in a more senior role, and that role requires a bigger picture view. That role requires spending more time in the marketplace, learning about the changes that are happening. You cannot be preoccupied with handling the situation. That strength will get you in trouble. You need to be out of the office, not in the office, doing everything every day. You need to delegate more. But we do this to ourselves. We promote people who are good at the tasks into positions that require more delegating. And there's been no training for that. So you're telling me the thing that got me promoted is now the thing I have to stop doing. And organizations do this to their people all the time. So how can we more thoughtfully, help people manage that transition? That's something I'm always thinking about. Okay, where are we? This little visual is really for me, so I know where I am, so I can see the bigger picture. It's very seductive here when 400 people are listening, and they've got their phones up, and maybe it's a picture of me, maybe it's the slide, but how to pay attention to the bigger job when you feel pulled in. It's very satisfying to keep talking. And maybe you do it in your meetings. Everyone's sitting there silently, so you just keep talking. But maybe it's time for a question. So, how do we stay curious and in command? How do we provide direction when we do not know what is next? We need to stay diagnostic, and we need to distinguish challenges from problems. And this is a little simple mindset shift with powerful implications. If you're facing a challenge and you've taken the time to diagnose it correctly, it cannot be fixed. You cannot fix challenges. You can fix problems, but challenges require learning. And really, all you can really do if you're confronting a challenge is make progress on it. But you can't fix a challenge. And this is, just a simple, 3 lines. But how to spend more time staying diagnostic with your teams and with your groups to really understand what is it we are confronting. I think one of the biggest risks in this new world, full of all sorts of awesome and amazing technologies, is that we will immediately see them as answers. So we'll confront a problem and we'll spend more time looking for the solution and interviewing vendors than we will diagnosing the problem. And one way to think about this is that these are adaptive challenges. And the biggest mistake we make is when we're confronting a big, difficult, adaptive challenge, a challenge that requires us to learn, and that's a small word, learn, with big implications, because often it means unlearning what we think we know how to do. If we're confronting a challenge that requires us to learn, and learn organizationally, that's another problem. It's easy to sort of read on your own, but to have the conversation across teams at different levels around what everyone needs to learn, that's a risky conversation for proud professionals who have been rewarded for answers. To expose what you need to learn to that group over there or to this group down here. We resist this much more than we realize. So challenges cannot be fixed. You can only make progress on a challenge, and that requires a lot of learning. I need to give work back. Do not take everything on. So the work of leadership now is really not doing things for people. The work of leadership is pushing the learning back at the people and then holding on to that. Maybe it's providing some resources, protecting time for them. But we are very quickly seduced or pulled into fixing things for others, especially when we're an authority figure and people are coming to us for answers. How to say, as an executive, I'm not sure, could you keep working on it? And give them the confidence that you know where this is going and they're allowed to work on it. Some organizations do this well. Some individuals do this well, but they're a rarity in the bigger organization. Some teams do this well, but it's certainly not the normal practice in our organizations of the people in charge sending work back. We need to invite people into our challenges and dilemmas. These challenges belong to our organization. Because we confuse self-enroll and because we personalize so quickly, when we are facing a challenge or a problem at work, we feel as though I need to fix it. This is my problem. I've got to do something about this. But as long as you're a member of an organization, it's the organization's problem. And you need to invite people into it. So how to be in charge and also invite people into your dilemma. It's very powerful when it's done well. Invite people into the challenge you're facing. Be transparent about why it's hard. This does a couple of things. It helps people connect to meaning and purpose at work. It also actively develops talent, one of the challenges we just talked about in the last session. Developing talent is also inviting them into the challenges of your position, getting them to think more about how you think from where you are, exposing that thinking to them so that they can then join you in thinking about what to do next, so it's not just you. Embrace not knowing. There is strength and courage in vulnerability. So one reason we don't publicly reveal what we don't know is because it can feel vulnerable to suggest, I don't know something. But it's also very courageous. It takes a lot of courage to stand in front of your own people and say, this is the problem, this is what I don't understand, this is what I think I do understand, I would like your help. Asking for help requires a lot of courage. Asking for help in a way that people feel connected to you is really difficult. It requires a lot of courage, and the rewards are massive. And your professional development is a team sport. So if we think about the soccer players, if you're preparing a soccer player for the World Cup, you just don't take that individual person and train them alone. That won't really help you. You prepare as a team. Then you diagnose strengths and weaknesses, and maybe individuals have their own workout, but all of that work is done as a team. We get better at our work in collaboration with others. I don't know how to be a better professor when I'm just on my own in my office. I learn how to be a better professor with my students and with my colleagues. That's where the feedback is. And I learn how to be a much better professor when I am transparent about what's difficult for me. And I can share, this is what's hard right now, this is what I don't understand how to do. And I can invite people into that. And if I am the chief executive, I can begin creating a culture of learning and development. If the person on top can't model that, it's going to be very hard to develop. It starts with the person on the top. And what we're usually in touch with here is how scary that feels, not with the opportunity and the courage and doing that. Okay. So this right here, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these 5 ideas, this is where the work of leadership is, and that work is distinct from the work of management and execution. We call ourselves leaders. It might be in our job title, but most of what we do is management work. It's executive work. It's director work. That is most of what we do. Just because you're in charge doesn't necessarily mean it's leadership. There's lots of people in charge that we like. There's lots of people in charge that we don't like. There's lots of people in charge that we don't like who are doing very important work. And there's lots of people in charge that we do like who are not doing very important work. We just like them because they're nice to us. So the work of leadership is really starting with this diagnosis, this gap. What do we say we're doing, and what are we actually doing? By the way, that's a difficult thing to do because then you start showing people what they're not doing, right? So once you start that diagnostic work, you get a lot of resistance, and you might become unpopular. But that's where the leadership work is. So how do you keep people included in what might be unpopular work? That's where you then have to use the resources of your authority, of your role. You know, people may not like the president, but he can still get them in the White House, right? People may not like the CEO, but the CEO can still get people into their office. There's a convening power there, and that's a tremendous resource. So how to use your convening power to do leadership work is something we don't often think about. We just assume it's all leadership work. But there's a difference between being in charge and doing the difficult leadership work, starting with that diagnosis. And doing both, taking care of the day-to-day and looking at the big picture and inviting people into the problems. This is the real work of an executive. And you anchor that work by focusing on the organization's contribution, its purpose, its mission, which you're always reevaluating if you do this well. How am I doing, Amy?
You're doing great.
Okay.
This is not doing great.
All right.
Can I get the mic on? Okay. So do you want to take a few questions?
I would love some help, so I stop talking.
Okay. I'm going to talk for a few minutes. Shall we
Okay.
take a seat?
Sure.
I'll walk right in front of you. So it sounds as if leadership, it's just gotten harder to be a great leader. I mean, things are coming at you faster, there's more complexity, technology is throwing more tasks at you, just managing your inbox can be a full-time job. Where do you see this going? What's going to get harder about it?
Gosh, isn't it hard enough?
Yeah.
What's going to get harder about it? I think we are all going to wind up with more and more employees who have brilliant ideas they think you should adapt. Mm-hmm. There's so many cool platforms out there. There's so much awesome data management software. There's so much big data people want to get into. And there's going to be a lot of pressure to take some of this on. And it may or may not be helpful to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And trying to toggle between the being in charge and being in charge plus. Or is it a toggle? Do you have to do these things simultaneously? Can you manage and lead brilliantly at once?
Yes, and it's really hard. And I think it's just hard for the human creature to do both. And it's because we're nested in organizations. And those organizations put a lot of demands on us. There's lots of teams, there's lots of people, and each one thinks you should be delivering something for them. So how to meet those expectations, manage them when they can't be met immediately, or maybe it's not actually useful to meet them, but manage those expectations and also do the leadership work. It's difficult. I think we need help. I think that the people I work with, when they make mistakes, they were working alone too long. They were trying to do it all themselves.
Mm-hmm. So you can't go into your cave and think you can solve every problem.
No.
And meet every challenge. So we don't have a lot of time, but let's take a question or two from the audience. And does someone have a mic? Okay.
How do you answer to the thesis or theory of capacity versus demand in the scenario that you're presenting here?
The capacity you have versus the demands on you?
Mm-hmm. Demands on the job.
I think the work of leadership and being in charge plus is always developing capacity. You may never actually have enough capacity, right?
I'm afraid not.
Yeah, but it can always be developed. There's so many missed opportunities to develop capacity. This idea of inviting people into your problems, that's a capacity building opportunity. That's helping people understand how you need to see it, and that helps them understand their job. But often we're afraid to bring people into that thought process. Business schools are terrific, and off-site professional developments are terrific. I work in a professional school, but the real training and development is on the job. If the people in charge know how to orchestrate that, know how to balance the support. So we grow from a combination of support and challenge. We need both of those, and then we need to reflect on the experience. I think we often, I've worked with a lot of people who want to provide more challenges. And I think often our organizations are challenging enough, and we need to think about the supports. And I'm not talking about naps and lunches. I'm talking about opportunities to make sense of the disorienting experiences people are having. Make sense of the stress, make sense of the anxiety, and look at the bigger picture. Okay, why is this happening to me? Why am I taking it personally? Oh, this is what the organization's going through right now. And this is how I feel it at my desk.
So making sense of the unknown as much as you can is the leader's job,
Yeah, the process work.
and communicating it.
Yeah, and communicating it. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, that's right.
So I'm looking at the clock. Oh, I don't think we have time for more questions. But this has been, what was that? One more. I'd love to take one more question. I see hands. Okay, whoever has the mic.
I'm happy to answer more questions over cocktails.
Their mic is coming right there.
So I was thinking that part of the problem of uncertainty is that it causes anxiousness.
Yes.
So I think one of the challenges in leaders is to understand what is the point in which making your team join you in this uncertainty
Yes.
is enough to keep you eager and working, and how much you need to contain in order for them to keep focus. So what would be your best advice in terms of containing anxiety caused by uncertainty?
Wow.
In a minute and a half.
Yeah, and what I love about the question, and this is how people evade questions, what I love about the question, this is, our organizations are made up of humans, and this is the human challenge. We flee anxiety, we flee uncertainty, and we create uncertainty to our own detriment. We sabotage our own organizations by applying technical fixes that we feel good at applying to challenges we don't fully understand. So this is if there's one way to summarize what we do poorly or how we get ourselves in trouble, we apply what we know, here's what I'm good at, to a challenge we don't fully understand. We haven't fully diagnosed. We look at it through our lens and say, that's the problem. And we make it a problem we can address. So you're inviting people into a bigger problem they don't fully understand, and anxiety will rise immediately. So you need the stomach and the capacity to know this is happening, to know people are anxious, and to know they're looking to you to fix it. I think that's the first thing you need. And then the second thing you need is structure and guidance. Here's how we're going to work through this. All day today at this offsite retreat, or on Wednesdays with Anna for an hour. You need two things. You need to remind people what they're doing and why, and you need the structures, so they feel held at least a little bit. The mistake is forming a committee. Committees almost always fail. When we send a group of people off with a budget to fix it, it lets the whole organization off the hook. Right, so don't form a committee. Invite people in and be transparent with everyone else about the work that they're trying to do. And know that some people are going to hate this. And they'll be okay. People can handle a lot of stress. I'm not saying we need to stress people out, but we can't respond to their immediate need to put the fire out. They will be okay, as long as they know someone's there.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
I think we could go on for another hour, although I think it would kill you. But this has been such a great conversation. You gave us all so much to chew on. There's so much complexity in leadership and so much balancing and integration that we have to do. So
I
thank
know.
you.
I'm sorry about that. There's more questions than answers. We have to think of them as living
It's
questions.
all